Hello and welcome to our next installment of Medical Forensics Online. I started with this slide because I was like, I didn't like the other PowerPoint, and frankly, I got spare time, so I made a new one. And this one I thought we'll just cover a couple of the different things. We're not going to end with this one. Remember I told you this would be like a 2 or 3 parter. This is the second part, and there will be a third part, because when I started getting into these notes, I was like, yeah, this is going to need a third part. So I picked these pictures thinking we need to go over psychometrics a little bit. We need to go over a little bit of the brain differences in people that are different psychologically. So when we actually test serial killers and murderers, we do see some differences in the physical brain characteristics. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to probably get to the point where we're talking about polygraph machines. And then we'll get into the straight murderers after that, probably the next installment. So this little potato murderer, I thought, well, he's the guy. Remember we did a shoebox? We had our little shoebox crime scenes. I'm going to go ahead and say this is the guy. He done did it in all of your potato box murders. I'm guessing it's this potato guy with a couple of guns. Okay, so we're going to get into psychometric tests. And last time, you guys, it's been a while, but because we had spring break in between and we all went on vacation to our houses. Psychometrics essentially is we're trying to measure individual differences between brains. So we're trying to measure differences in intelligence between brains, and also personality tests between brains, and mainly with the idea of being able to predict behavior. That's the whole point of these psychometric tests, is to go all right, we have these individuals that could potentially be turn out good and turn out bad, and we want to get in front of it one way or the other. So that's what the psychometric tests kind of serve the purpose for. So just so you've heard it, and I don't know, you can be like, oh, I heard it this one time in Roadhouse's class. There are 3 different types of tests: objective, systematic, and standardized. And when you look at those objective, the objective tests are going to be where every observer would produce identical accounts of what took place. So that would be an objective test. A systematic test would be a methodical or a consistent approach to understanding an event. And then standardized are just observations are made in a prescribed manner. This, then this, then this. So I'm not going to test you on that, but just so you've heard it, it was in our curriculum. There's objective, systematic, and standardized. So the pic that's on this one, the picture that's on this particular slide, is more of, it would be looking at a type of intelligence. We'd be looking more at cognitive reasoning. Versus we're not really looking at personality with this one. We're looking at what can your brain do? Okay, so that's what this one's kind of looking at. So kind of getting into that, I've put in 2 new pictures on this slide. So if you look, there's one where they're here is a naming exercise, and here's some different sequences that you would begin 1A and then 2 would go to B, and these are kinds of cognitive tests. So this would be an example of a cognitive test, where we would probably put this one to little kids. You would hope this would be a college test, but I'm thinking that you're probably farther along than the 1A, 2B thing. And then if you see in the bottom right corner, that's kind of that is the test that we took. Essentially, we were learning what personality type do you have, and mine was. I can't read that very good. It was, I think, in the green category is where I was sort of stationed. Okay, so cognitive tests, just so you kind of understand, there are differences they look at. And when you take into account that someone's IQ, they're looking at tests that are going to, we're looking at the brain for speed. How fast can you get this out? We're looking at tests for how much power you produce and for this problem, or just knowledge tests. So that's going to be cognitive tests. With personality tests, we're going to know what are the feelings, what are the actions and rate your own feelings and actions in set situations. So that would be like one, or the second one is just an unstructured response for ambiguous situations. Like a lot of times you'll see on movies and stuff like, here's an ink blot. What does this ink blot look like to you? And that would be an unstructured response to a personality test. I'm not sure what those even tell you. Okay, so here are some of the problems with psychometric tests, because we're trying to get in front of it. We're trying to decide like what's relevant in terms of determining what kind of character this person will have. And when faced with a psychometric test, here are some of the problems that arise. So the first one is going to be social desirability. So when you talk about social desirability, sometimes people will take a test and they could either be super optimistic about who they are, overly optimistic about what they would choose, because they have some sort of self-deception going on where they buy into this idea that they're better maybe than they are. And there's another one that's kind of like, in order to be socially desirable, they'll take into account other people's impressions. So while they're taking the test, they want to appear nice to other people. And so they'll answer the questions based on what they think other people will like. So social desirability is the first thing that could change the outcome of a psychometric test. The second thing is the mood. So I want you to think about, like, right now, like all of us are saying like, okay, let's take a psychometric test, Viewmont High School, and see, just see what your psychology looks like, and let's just see how your personality is. And probably a lot of us aren't in a very good mood right now, because they're like, sit at home and just keep sitting there for a while. And so our moods aren't great. This might be the worst possible time to take a personality test, because don't ask us to give you some positive feedback when we're feeling like we're stuck in our houses and stuff like that. Okay, so that could affect it. They've also pointed to things like when a person's taking a test, sometimes the environment, the actual room itself, can cause them to feel different ways. And so the mood can be a problem in terms of like how the environment sort of sets the mood for the test. So you probably wanted to control for outcome. Maybe you would stick them in a room that was not too like happy or sad, somewhere like neutral, so they could not have the environment affect their mood. Third thing is relevance. So let me just kind of think about like, let's just say like if we have, for sake of argument, so and I can talk about this because I have blue collar workers in my family. I come from a long line of blue collar workers that I'm super proud of. My dad's a brick mason. My oldest brother is also a brick mason. So perhaps if you were to take someone into account that's like, maybe they're going to take over Pop's business or something like that. Maybe we've got a plumber and then the son is going to also be a plumber. So when they're taking a test that's like, pick out all of the proper nouns in this paragraph, maybe they don't really care, because perhaps their job will be like wrangling turds and making more money, by the way, than most. Yeah, you shouldn't be looking down on blue collar workers, because they're making some bank out there, and it could be a good option for lots of different people. Last but not least is a test bias, and we've heard about this with the ACT. You can't expect people who haven't grown up in an area to have the exact same knowledge as people that were maybe from a different area. So say like an immigrant comes to a country and they probably are pretty cognizant of who the leaders are right then, but maybe they don't know like who started our country and different battles and wars that we've fought in. And that could be a test bias that exists on something like a standardized testing measure like an ACT or something like that, where maybe a new fresh immigrant wouldn't have the same knowledge and wouldn't have the same upbringing as someone that lived here their whole lives. So those are some of the problems with it. And here is how we kind of diagnose. So we can do things with different diagnostic tools that allow us to see inside the brain. So there are what's called a PET scan. And I'm going to just read off for you the technology with that is positron emission tomography. And it's based on the molecular biology, what's happening. It's giving us basically what's happening at the cellular level. So positron emission tomography. And then we also have an MRI, which is magnetic resonance imaging. So in this case, it's a powerful magnetic field. Radio frequency pulses are basically sent, and then it computes to produce detailed pictures of internal structures. So I was trying to think of like, what have I had in my life? And I've had MRIs. I've had a couple of MRIs. So one was for the recent surgery that I had, the appendectomy, and then another one. Fun fact, here's a fun story for you. When I was in my early 20s, I was participating in karate tournaments. I used to do Kenpo karate, and I would do they would do where you'd have to go through and do different things. Kata, I think is what it was called. It's been so long ago, but you'd have to go through certain, it's a block here, whatever. You'd have to do different kind of karate dances in one type of competition. Another competition was fighting, and I was fighting on in my early 20s. I was fighting this other lady, and I actually ended up winning. I have the trophy here. I might go get it for you just to prove it, but I got first place. Ended up getting all the points that I needed to get first place. But I feel like I kind of lost in the end because I got home after that karate tournament, laid on the bed, and was just kind of like, oh, I hurt so bad. My back hurts so bad. And then I started to urinate blood. So my husband was like, that can't be good. We went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, okay, tell me what happened. I was like, well, I was in a karate tournament. She gave me a really good side kick, like here, and like kicked pretty hard. I was like, that's the only thing I can figure. She got a really good side kick in, and now I'm peeing blood. So that's good. And he was like, oh, okay, well, you know what? Let's just get a urine sample. And I think we're just going to get you right out of here. And then, so I did. I went and peed in a cup, brought it out, and set it on the counter, and it looked like grape juice. And so the doctor's jaw dropped kind of, and he was like, we're going to get you in for an MRI right now. So they went and scanned it. Basically, there were some blood vessels that had burst in my kidney. It wasn't a huge deal, but because it looked like grape juice, he was like, yeah, we're going to take a look. So, she got the better shot in, but I got first place. So, okay. So, PET scans are when we're diagnosing brains, they tend to be really good about like movement disorders like epilepsy and Alzheimer's and like dementia. So it's a good scan for that. But the MRI seems to be, and in this picture that I have on the slide, the color one is going to be the PET scan, the black and white. All of these are transverse cut. So we're looking at like that we took off the top of the head and we're looking down on it. So in the transverse view. So the bottom right is going to be an MRI, and that tends to be the most sensitive technology when it comes to looking at the brain is the MRI scan. So we're going to get into some abnormalities next up. So we've talked a little bit about these differences, these anatomical differences. We've seen some changes in the prefrontal cortex in some of these, when we talk about murderers specifically or serial killers. The prefrontal cortex is where we have basically our personality is housed as well as a lot of our decision-making skills. And we have seen problems with the prefrontal cortex in people that, not in every single brain, but in a lot of these killers brains. So we can have issues with the prefrontal cortex. Remember the limbic system or the limbic lobe, sort of midbrain area, that's where we process emotions. So we know that there are some issues with processing emotions. The thalamus is another place. The thalamus, it's like midbrain. The thalamus is like tell the operator, incoming data going up to parietal lobe, interpreting, here is it going, it's going back. So there could be issues with thalamus, the thumb of the operator portion of the brain. We know that the amygdala is something that they have noticed when it's abnormally large. It has some issues that create problems for people that maybe have just the right psychology, or the corpus callosum, which is when you're looking at this sagittal cut of the brain that's on this slide, that little sort of white tissue in the middle, you can see the arbor vitae of the cerebellum. This is a mid-sagittal cut, it looks like. So kind of right behind where the orbit is, where the eye sits, if you kind of go straight behind that, you'll see that kind of almost like an upside down Nike swoosh. That's going to be your corpus callosum, and that allows you to talk from hemisphere to hemisphere in the brain. So these are all places where, with the PET scan, with an MRI scan, they have seen some differences, some changes in people who are doing nefarious activity, like killing people. These are different areas of the brain where they have noted brain abnormalities in killers, and we're looking at the psychology of a killer in this unit. So these are the different types of things that we've talked about in class. But I wanted to make sure I hit on each of those again, because those could come up later. What causes these brain abnormalities and abnormal psychology? Well, this is where we get into the nature versus nurture debate. Or is it genetics? Is it environment? And the truth is, in every case, the answer is like, we haven't really come up with a good answer. So that last assignment we did before the world blew up was where you guys started tackling things like, does it matter if your dad's there? Does it matter if you grow up in poverty? Does it matter if maybe your parents had abnormalities that could have been passed down genetically? So maybe they have bipolar disorder, which is, again, not necessarily a disorder that we worry about. Or if we do have an actual, like, here's dad who is a psychopath, and maybe that same brain chemistry comes through the genes, and the next one's a psychopath. So remember, we've had forensic scientists who have been studying the brain and the brain changes, and they do those same tests on themselves. And there have been instances where they're like, okay, apparently I'm also a psychopath. So remember that just because they have maybe a personality disorder or a social personality disorder where they're antisocial, that doesn't necessarily mean, oh, murderer right here, here's the one. It actually could be a piece of the puzzle that maybe links them with, in the end, maybe they're the corporate CEO with all the money, and they've maybe stepped on people to get up there, but they haven't technically hurt anyone. So it could be genetics. It could be like when we talked about my heroin addicted brother-in-law. It could be like, oh, we took this exit, or we took this on-ramp onto this freeway of choices where all of our friends are going this direction, and we're all saying like, oh yeah, heroin, that's a great idea. Let's just keep going with that fun idea, and stealing things too, so we can support the habit. And he's on this highway of choices, and there are exits along the way. He could have maybe taken an exit, and he didn't. So in his case, remember also that we talked about his biological mother, because he is adopted. His biological mother was addicted to drugs. And is that a factor when it comes to someone committing a crime? So I don't want to imply at all that my brother-in-law has murdered anyone, but nobody's seen him for years, so it could be. It could be environment, it could be individual choice, it could be genes. It's likely all of them, because I just, in the slide, I said likely both, nature versus nurture. Yeah, it's likely your genes and combined with the environment. And you remember, like we talked about reading stories, and we colored the ugly duckling and things like that. if a kid's not nurtured, I have to ask, like, do they have really good options for their future? And it makes me actually want to go hug every kid that's out there and just be like, you can do it. You can do it. Because sometimes the environment just makes it so much worse. So that's nutshell where I wanted to get to today. I want to give you a little teaser, I guess, for the next one. Or actually, I'm kind of making you guys do it. I want you to entertain me for a minute. So you're going to research polygraphs in this assignment. So I'm essentially going to give you an assignment that follows what I've said throughout the video, where you have to do like a video guide, but also there's going to be an assignment on polygraph machines, because sometimes what we're trying to figure out is whether or not a criminal is lying or not. So we're trying to figure out, all right, if we put these basically biological data machines, we hook them up to your body and see what happens. I don't know if you kind of know what a polygraph is, but essentially it's a lie detector machine. And you guys are going to research a little bit of the history and what the polygraph is, so you can kind of be prepared for the next time around. So just to give you guys a heads up for what's coming, we are going to wrap up Unit 8 in the next video notes. I'm going to go ahead and put together a monstrously good. It's going to be amazing. It's going to either be a Quizlet or it's going to be a Kahoot. And I want you to play it and get ready for the test that'll be on Strand 8. And it'll come like one more installment of notes, and then we'll have the test the time after that. But as always, know that I miss you. Know that there's a mom just today I was hiking up the mountain and she was like, hey, do you miss school? And I'm like, yeah, this is pretty dumb. And yes, I want to be in front of my kids, and I want to give my seniors a good send off and make sure that you guys are happy and healthy. This is not ideal for teachers, and not ideal for moms either. So I'll post the assignment. I want you to take your mom for at least one walk today. Take her out. We're caged animals. We're like those big cats at the zoo that are just pacing because we have to be inside all the time. Take care of us, please. We're taking care of you. You take care of us too. All right. Please contact me if you are lacking resources, if your family needs help. I will plug in and find resources for you. And I'll see you next time.